In a world that worships predictability, the unreadable man becomes a myth, a mirror without a reflection. Society has always clung to labels. It needs to classify you, measure you, tame you. But when you stop broadcasting your emotions, when you master the art of stillness in a chaotic room, people don't know what to do with you. You've removed their compass. Suddenly, every smile you don't give, every reaction you withhold, becomes a threat. Because now, they can't mold you. They can't figure out if you're prey or predator. That unsettles them. And fear, my dear friend, is the currency of control. The silent man who watches, listens, calculates. He is a ghost to the herd, a storm to the shepherd. When you become unreadable, you become untouchable. And what they cannot touch, they begin to dread. You see, the modern machine thrives on transparency, but not the kind you think. Not honesty, not vulnerability. It wants your patterns, it wants your data, your cravings, your tics, your weaknesses. It feeds on predictability. It markets your impulses back to you, wraps your desires in glitter, then sells you a leash. But you break the loop when you become unreadable. When your eyes stop confirming their expectations. When your silences scream louder than their monologues. You aren't rejecting society. You're rewriting your role in it. You're telling the world, you don't get to decode me. I burned the manual. That's when they fear you. Not because you're evil, but because you've become independent of their script. And in a system built on manipulation, independence is the ultimate rebellion. There's psychology to this too. The human brain is wired to complete patterns. When it sees a face, it needs to attach emotion. When it hears a tone, it wants to assign meaning. When it interacts with you, it subconsciously asks, is he safe? Is he one of us? But if your demeanor is calm and unfazed, if your speech is deliberate and your gaze unwavering, they can't compute you. That gap, the dissonance between what they expect and what you deliver, triggers unease. That's fear, dressed in confusion. That's respect, born from uncertainty. And it's exactly what keeps wolves from barking. They can't sink their teeth into fog. You become the man whose presence distorts the room, whose calm unsettles the chaos. You're not just unreadable, you're a walking riddle, and they hate not having the answer key. Now here's the cruel joke. Most people don't want to be mysterious. They want to be liked. They want validation, applause, a seat at the table. So they overshare. They reveal too much too soon. They hand out their fears like party favors. And in doing so, they become predictable, weak, tame. The readable man is easy to exploit. His smiles are shallow. His emotions are owned by the room. But you become power when you choose silence over explanation, mystery over exposure. You don't blink first. You let the awkwardness marinate. You make them work to know you, and most won't try. Because true depth demands effort, and the shallow ones drown in silence. So ask yourself, are you willing to be feared? Not because you harm, but because you transcend their understanding? Are you prepared to walk into rooms where no one knows what you're thinking and smile as their discomfort betrays them? That is the way of the unreadable man. That is your evolution. Let them fear what they cannot name. Let your silence become your anthem. Because in this noisy, frantic, overshared world, the one who says the least often holds the most power. Not through cruelty, not through deception, but through restraint. Through the mastery of not needing to be known, not fully, not ever. Mystery disrupts the fragile architecture of power because power thrives on certainty. Power does not rest on thrones or in titles. It rests in perception. It's a dance of illusions, held together by threads of predictability. They, the orchestrators of influence, need to know who you are, what you want, and how you'll react. The moment you sever that connection, the blueprint begins to decay. Mystery becomes your weapon. It infects their structure like a virus, corroding every assumption they built around you. Their grip weakens, not because you attacked, but because you vanished behind the veil. They can't lead what they can't read. They can't manipulate what they can't predict. And in a world addicted to surveillance, your silence becomes the loudest act of defiance. Every unreadable move is a crack in their illusion of control. You're no longer a player. They just realized you were never on the board to begin with. You see, power needs reaction. That's its fuel. It throws stones just to see your ripple. It pokes just to provoke. But when you respond with nothingness, with stillness so impenetrable they feel it echoing through their bones, it shatters their rhythm. You've unplugged from the circuit. You've stopped feeding the beast. They press, they probe, they even provoke, but your face remains the same. Your eyes remain unreadable. In that void, they begin to spiral. Their confidence, which once towered over rooms, starts to tremble, because now they're questioning what's behind the curtain. And the mind, the mind will always imagine something far more dangerous than what actually lies there. That's your edge. That's your empire, not built with bricks, but with the weight of unspoken presence. Their systems tremble, not because you raised your voice, but because you made them question their own. Power, in its truest form, is a house of cards built on routine outcomes. When you introduce the variable of mystery, the whole deck trembles. Suddenly their authority feels hollow. Their threats lose sharpness. Their influence starts to erode like chalk in a storm. Why? Because they never accounted for the unpredictable. They thought they had you mapped, categorized, labeled, dissected. But now, you're a void wrapped in flesh, a question they can't answer. And uncertainty breeds fear. Not the fear of violence, but the fear of not knowing what comes next. You've infected their timeline. You've broken their ability to forecast. And power that cannot predict becomes panic in disguise. The secret they never want you to learn is this: power doesn't collapse from rebellion. It collapses from ambiguity. It craves order. It needs to know what you'll do, even when you pretend to resist. But when you become unreadable, when your patterns vanish and your intentions dissolve, they no longer have a counterplay. They begin to react, not to your actions, but to your stillness, to the way you walk into a room and say nothing, but everyone shifts, to the way you look at them, not with aggression, but with a gaze so still, it reveals their fragility. That's the art of psychological warfare. Not chaos, not loudness, but calm, deliberate invisibility. While they scream for clarity, you become the quiet storm that makes their knees buckle. And now you understand what you are to them. A threat, not because of violence, but because of silence. A shadow they can't illuminate. A mirror they can't reflect. They hate it. They need context. They need conclusions. But you offer none. You respond with contradiction. You smile at their judgments. You nod without agreeing. And in doing so, you turn every conversation into a maze. You don't even need to speak. Your existence alone becomes an interruption in their hierarchy. Their system, designed to reward those who comply and expose those who rebel, has no protocol for someone like you. You're not rebelling, you're not complying, you're orbiting, and they hate that. Because nothing terrifies control more than someone who doesn't need its permission to exist. Mystery, you see, is not just silence. It's weaponized stillness. It's the strategic absence of noise. They can control the loud. They can mute the angry. But how do you cage what you cannot hear coming? How do you break what never resists? They can't touch you, and they know it. So they turn to whispers. They paint you as dangerous, not because you did anything, but because you might. The potential of your unknown becomes the legend they fear. You become the whispered story at midnight, the warning behind locked doors, the question mark they pass around like a prophecy. And with every rumor, you gain more ground. You win, not through combat, but through their trembling need to explain you. Now listen closely. Most men drown in the need to be understood. They want applause for their pain. They want love for their wounds. But you build your identity in silence. You don't seek understanding. You build enigma like a fortress. Let them assume. Let them guess wrong. Let them project their fears onto you. The more they misunderstand you, the stronger you become. Because every assumption is a rope they tie around themselves, thinking it binds you. But the truth is, they've imprisoned themselves in a box labeled with your name, while you walk freely in a world they can't follow. That's the power of the unreadable man. He doesn't resist the system. He becomes too complex for it. Modern society worships simplicity, digestible roles, easy answers. That's why it panics at mystery. Every algorithm needs data. Every corporation needs patterns. Every leader needs subjects who act predictably. And here you are, standing in the center of the simulation, refusing to play by the script. You disrupt not just their expectations, but their very model of reality. You become the ghost in their machine, the unprogrammable virus. That's the apex of power, not control, but elusiveness. You don't need a crown. You don't need recognition. Your presence alone rewrites the architecture around you. That's what power used to be before they diluted it with fame and noise. Real power was always the man in the shadows who said nothing, but changed everything. Let them obsess. Let them try to unravel your silence. Let them send spies, rumors, theories. Every attempt to understand you is another confirmation of your dominance. Because power, once threatened, reveals its desperation. Watch how the mighty grow paranoid. Watch how the confident tremble in your gaze. They don't fear you because you're cruel. They fear you because they don't know what you'll do next. That is the ultimate form of control. Not doing, but being unpredictable. Not shouting, but watching. Not reacting, but calculating. And while they burn themselves trying to decipher your silence, you'll already be 3 steps ahead, rewriting the story they thought they authored. They fear what they cannot map because their power is cartographic. They draw their dominance like blueprints, measuring your every move with rulers forged in routine. Your habits, your reactions, your little tells. They log it all, studying you like a system to be debugged. They crave patterns because patterns give them leverage. The moment they can anticipate, they begin to premeditate. They speak before you do. They plan your responses. They design rooms with your reactions in mind. That is how they maintain control, not by force, but by expectation. But you ruined the algorithm. You corrupted the grid. You shattered the compass they used to trace you. And now, they are stranded in the terrain of your silence, with no map, no warning, no way to prepare. That's what makes you dangerous. Not because you attack, but because they don't know if you ever will. They aren't scared of chaos. Chaos is loud, visible, and reckless. What they dread is the unknowable, the anomaly, the ghost in the program. That's you. They whisper about you more than they confront you, because they need context, and you offer fog. You don't move on predictable cues. You don't smile to soothe. You don't speak to fill gaps. You move when it benefits you. You speak only when your words are daggers. They can't map you, so they default to defense. That's why you walk into a room and people shift. Not because you did something, but because they feel something they cannot articulate. A pressure in the air. A stillness that suffocates. Your unpredictability doesn't just unsettle them, it erodes them. They start rehearsing conversations in their heads, preparing retorts for attacks you never make. That is the genius of ambiguity. It makes them carry a burden you never gave them. They rehearse your life more than you live it. That's the paradox. Because when they can map you, they feel in control. But when they can't, their survival instinct kicks in. Their mind imagines scenarios. They project motives. They turn your mystery into mythology. And soon, they aren't just confused by you. They're obsessed with you. Because you're the one detail that doesn't fit. The variable that ruins their equations. You walk like a question mark. You speak like a cipher. You become the shadow they can't dispel. And the human mind, when it cannot label something, turns to fear as its first defense. That's how you dominate, without ever lifting a finger. They're building theories. You're building silence. They're drawing diagrams. You're dissolving borders. And with every breath you don't explain, you take more space in their thoughts. Their obsession with mapping isn't born from curiosity. It's born from fear of losing control. They do not want to understand you out of interest. They want to reduce you, shrink you into something manageable. They want to shrink you into a blueprint they can fold and store away. That way, they'll always know what room you'll enter, what phrase you'll speak, what emotion you'll display. They don't want the real you. They want the version they can anticipate. But you're not here to be digested. You're here to disrupt. Your silence is not emptiness. It's structureless chaos. You become a code that doesn't decrypt, a mirror that doesn't reflect, a step that doesn't echo. In their world of predictability, you are the one who walks backward through mazes and burns the blueprint behind you. They call you cold. They call you distant. But what they truly mean is, we can't read him. We can't control him. And that terrifies them. Because society doesn't reward the unreadable. It punishes them. It brands them antisocial, difficult, dangerous. But you wear those labels like armor. Let them attempt to psychoanalyze. Let them stare into your eyes, hoping for emotional clarity. All they'll find is the abyss staring back. You don't give them enough data to weaponize. You give them silence. You give them unpredictability. And in that stillness, you become a storm. Their questions echo, but your answers never arrive. And so they prepare for everything, fearing nothing and everything at once. Their minds run marathons trying to anticipate your next move. Meanwhile, you sit, still, watching. Powerless people panic in uncertainty. That's why they cling to certainty like a life raft. They need to know what mood you'll be in, how you'll react to praise or insult. but you've trained yourself to erase reaction. You've weaponized indifference. So now their compliments bounce off. Their insults dissolve. They throw stones into your waters and wait for ripples. But there are none. That absence haunts them. That void is your rain. You've stopped giving them feedback loops to control. And in return, you've made them prisoners of their own projections. Every silence of yours becomes a canvas they panic to fill. And most paint monsters, not because you are one, but because fear fills gaps with shadows. You don't speak in code. You are the code. They spend sleepless nights trying to decipher what you meant by a look, a pause, a step back. But your ambiguity isn't accidental. It's surgical. You've stripped yourself of obviousness. You've chosen to be illegible on purpose. Every glance you give feels like it has 10 meanings. Every silence stretches into eternity. You are psychological warfare wrapped in calm. And they don't know which version of you they'll face. So they prepare for all. And in preparing for all, they exhaust themselves into defeat. That's the beauty of being unreadable. You don't have to attack. You just make them defend until they collapse from the weight of their own paranoia. Their logic falters in your presence. Their rehearsed lines stutter. Their confidence trembles. Because you don't follow the rhythm. You don't respond when cued. You operate on your own frequency, and it's one they can't tune into. That makes you a disruption, a threat. They want you to explain yourself, to define yourself, to conform to the patterns they've made space for. But you refuse. You stay undefined. And the undefined becomes unsettling. Because what they can't define, they can't control. And what they can't control, they eventually fear. You don't need to win arguments. You make them forget their lines. You don't need to prove superiority. You dissolve their hierarchy just by being beyond their calculation. You don't exist in their blueprint. That's what really drives them mad. You are the crack in the wall, the deviation in their pattern. You remind them that not everything can be anticipated, that not every enemy will reveal his hand. You are chaos, wearing calm, like a mask. And every time you walk past with that deliberate stillness, they rehearse 1,000 theories, 1,000 motives. They think they're studying you, but they're unraveling themselves. Because no man who tries to map a void comes back whole. They fear you not because you hide something, but because you could be hiding everything. You are not a page to be read. You are the closed book that makes the entire library uneasy. They crave formulas because formulas feel safe. They want to plug your every move into an equation. If he feels X, he'll do Y. But you have rewritten the laws of their physics. Your silence doesn't follow grief. Your laughter doesn't follow joy. You're no longer cause and effect. You've become anomaly and aftermath. And that terrifies them. Because when they can't predict you, they can't plan for you. You are the variable that demolishes every structure they built to keep their world safe. Their entire perception of control collapses when faced with someone who plays by no observable rhythm. You rob them of comfort, not with chaos, but with composure. You make stillness into something dangerous, a ticking bomb without sound, a presence that triggers alarm with nothing but breath. And in their frantic attempts to decode you, they expose their own fragility. You're not the one on trial. They are. You've become the monster they painted in their own minds. They imagined your anger, scripted your vengeance, calculated your rebellion. They filled in your blanks with every fear they've ever known. Because it's easier to believe you're a threat than to accept you're above them. That's why they slander what they don't understand. That's why they label what they can't control. Because admitting they can't map you means accepting you exist outside their dominion. And that means their power has limits, and they hate limits. They despise the reminder that their influence ends where your silence begins. They can't rule the man they can't predict, so they demonize him instead. They brand your stillness as arrogance, your mystery as malice. But beneath their public proclamations lies a simple, trembling truth. They're afraid, not because of what you've done, but because of what you've withheld. What they can't predict, they cannot own. And ownership is the engine of their empire. They want to own your smile, your weakness, your thoughts, your triggers. But you've erased the path to your core. You've become an enigma, intact, impervious, untamed. Every emotion you withhold becomes a mirror they're forced to stare into. And in that reflection, they don't see power.